first. Earlier this month, U.S. President Donald Trump took over the D.C. Police Department, ordering federal law enforcement to begin patrolling the city. He cited high crime rates despite statistics from local police that indicate violent crime has been steadily decreasing since a spike in 2023. It comes after Trump used similar tactics in California in June, deploying the troops without consent of the state's governor. Tessa Bennett joins us in studio with more on what experts are saying about this use of the National Guard. Tessa?
Manisa, experts are saying deploying the National Guard is uncommon unless it's an emergency that state authorities can't manage on their own. But the situation in Washington, D.C. is a bit more complicated. The district is what's called a non-state, leaving the issue of what forces have jurisdiction in somewhat of a gray area.
Free D.C.! Free D.C.! Free D.C.!
Hundreds of U.S. National Guard troops were called in by President Donald Trump to patrol the streets of Washington, D.C.
I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
The deployment came after the president enacted an emergency federal takeover of D.C.'s police department. Trump cited issues with violent crime in the city for needing to federalize the National Guard.
Normally, use of the National Guard involves either getting a query from a state governor or a state governor deciding for themselves to activate the National Guard. But it's pretty unusual for the president to use the National Guard without any kind of consultation or approval or communication with the governor of the state in question.
The National Guard is typically used in emergency situations, including natural disasters and massive riots or protests. These troops were also called upon on January 6, 2021, during the attack on the Capitol. The situation on the ground in D.C. is not the first time since Trump's return to office that he's used this tactic, claiming an emergency situation. In June, the president deployed 4,000 National Guard troops and another 700 Marines to Los Angeles. He said at the time they were needed to protect federal property and law enforcement agents amid outcry over the immigration and customs enforcement operations happening in the city. California's Governor Gavin Newsom was outraged over the federalization of the troops for engaging in domestic law enforcement. He later filed a lawsuit asking the court to consider whether the Posse Comitatus Act, which bans this type of military action, applied to the deployment in LA.
But it could be that what the Trump folks want to do is to get rid of the operation of the so-called Posse Comitatus Act. There's already lots of loopholes. It's not a perfect system, but they may want to get rid of that restriction on the use of the military for civilian law enforcement.
But the situation in Washington may not be subject to the same legal treatment because it's not a state.
This is different from California because this National Guard that controls D.C. is already under federal control. So he didn't have to do anything special to use it in this way.
Trump's press secretary says this action will continue in D.C. over several weeks to remove as many criminals as possible.
Our entire focus is making sure that this is the most efficient operation possible and that we are removing as many criminals from the streets and we are cleaning up D.C. as best as we can.
And Trump might be looking to use this method elsewhere as well. He's threatened to deploy troops in both New York and Chicago.
A mandate as wide as pursue every criminal suggests a very long timeline, which is the kind of thing that raises alarm bells for people who track and worry about overstepping of authority in federal systems.
Despite the questions around the legality of the president's use of the National Guard and the resistance of citizens of D.C., it seems various levels of law enforcement share the same goal: to get criminals off the streets.